I'm joined with Bronwyn Evans today, which I'm super excited about. Bronwyn comes from the same town that I used to grow up in Hawke's Bay in New Zealand. So if my accent becomes really strong today, it's simply because I'm talking to another Kiwi, and I haven't done that for a while. So
Kiwi with a strong accent.
That's it. So thanks for talking to me today, Bronwyn. Would you like to talk a little bit about your journey to publication?
Yeah, sure. Mine's probably the same as everyone else's. I've always had stories in my head, but I'm actually slightly dyslexic, and English was not a favourite subject at school, and I thought that I'd never be able to write for a living. But I think what is important is your storytelling ability as well as your writing ability, because editors can help you if you're slightly dyslexic. And I know there's lots of other dyslexic authors like Christy Craig, who's New York Times, etc. So it didn't stop me in the end. But I did come late to writing, and I had a friend who actually passed away. He was very ill, and he made me promise to finish a book and try and sell it.
Excellent.
So I did finish a book, and I entered it in one of the American contests, and one of the judges said to me, I think my editor would really love this, and I sent it to that editor, and she bought it. So that was my first ever finished book, and it was just really being in the right place at the right time, and there is an awful lot of luck in this game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's basically my story to how I got published. Yeah.
Excellent. And so you're writing Regency. So how did that all come about? Have you always loved Regency?
It's really interesting because I'm going back maybe 2006. In New Zealand, the mainly published authors were Mills and Boon, Harlequin, Mills and Boon authors, and so of course everyone connected to Romance Writers of New Zealand sort of tried to write for Harlequin. And I remember at my very first conference in 2006, I pitched a Harlequin contemporary, and the editor happened to say to me, well, what do you love reading? And I said, well, I love reading historicals. And she said, well, I suggest you start by trying to write what you love to read. And so I did. I swapped to historicals, and that's what I sold first.
That's fantastic. Is it mainly English, or it's Scottish a little bit, or?
I do Regency English predominantly, but I was just invited this year to partake in a Scottish anthology. So I've just done my first Scottish Regency and really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Excellent. So that's with some other authors. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, St Martin's Press. St Martin's Press Swerve. I'm with 4 other authors who some of them I know, some of them I don't. Leisha Cornwall, May McGoldrick, Terry Brisbane, and Lavinia Kent, I think, is the other 4 authors. And they just said, would you like to write a Scottish historical for us? And the Scottish historicals within the Christmas and Kilts is across all time periods. So there's a medieval, and then there's a 1700, then there's 1800s. So it's a really nice collection of Scottish historicals.
Oh, fantastic. And for all of us Outlander fans, I'm sure we're going to absolutely adore that. So that one's coming out pretty soon, in October?
31st of October, and it's up for pre-order, and it's on Goodreads and doing the rounds as they all do.
Wonderful. That sounds like a brilliant stuffing stock, or are we getting one of those? So before you got into writing, you actually got a degree in commerce and administration, right? Majoring in marketing and accounting.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a businesswoman.
Wow.
And I did do that. I worked for quite a few big corporates, both here and I lived in London for 8 years and worked for a couple of the big banks in the UK. Then I came back to New Zealand and wanted to try and do something for myself, and eventually I set up a e-commerce company, which got listed on the New Zealand Stock Exchange, and I sold that about 3 years later, and that's when I decided to look around at trying to write. So yeah, I've done that ever since.
Gosh, that's a big leap. Do you ever regret it? Do you ever want to go back to that?
No. I don't really even call writing a job, even though it is, because I love it. And I think that's the thing. If you love writing, you'll do it regardless of whether you sell or don't sell. And, you know, I'm friends with Grace Burrows, for example, and Grace Burrows was the lawyer for 30-odd years, and she had about 30 manuscripts in her bottom drawer before she even thought about taking the risk of, you know, putting it out to editors. And now she's reaping the rewards from all of those manuscripts, which have all been bought or being used. So you never know when a story is going to become a useful tool for you. So if you love writing, just write.
That's it. Oh, that's incredible. And you've got an agent, an American agent. Can you tell us about that experience of getting an agent?
Well, agents are, you know, there's various reasons why you want an agent. And in the space of self-pubbing, when I first started in 2010, there were no not much self-pubbing going on at all, and so to get into some of the big houses you needed an agent, and I met one of the agents that came to the Romance Writers of New Zealand conference, and she signed me. I think at that stage, you know, when you're a beginning author and you've only finished your first book, I didn't really know what I needed in an agent, and I think that's your first point of call. You have to understand what you need. I actually need an editing agent because I am slightly dyslexic. And my first agent wasn't, so we parted ways because we didn't fit each other. And then I went looking in particular for an editing agent. I also wanted an agent who was hungry. Yeah. So I did turn down a very big agent because I thought I'd be a little fish in a big pond, whereas if I went with a newer agent, I was going to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. So, and that's worked out particularly well. And I think you do have to know, if you want to self-publish as well, then you need to make sure your agent is happy with you doing that. And some agents even are offering to help the self-pub. So it just depends what you're looking for. And even if you are self-pubbing, you know, like my agent has sold my audio rights for my self-pubbed and looking at foreign rights. So that's another reason, even if you're self-pubbing, to look for a foreign rights agent or someone else who can do all of that other work for you. Yeah.
That's really cool. So you're self-published as well as traditionally published.
Right. I'm hybrid. Yeah.
Excellent. So is there particular stories that you'd rather self-publish when you write them, or do you write the sorts of books that your agent really wants to pitch to?
No, I just decide what I want to do. I think that you know, you're always going for, you know, it's quite nice to be hybrid because you can get the advance, can cover some of your money up front, and then you've also got the ability to self-pub to generate your monthly income as well. So it's just a matter of looking at things like, I've got a new series which my agent's going to start to shop shortly, and I'll be very selective of who I go with, because it could possibly be a 10 or 20 book series, and you don't want to give that to a publishing house if you think that they're not going to carry that right through, because once you've given a series to a publishing house, it's really hard to self-publish the rest because you don't control the beginning of the series. You can't price it, you can't do specials, etc. So you've got to look at what you want to give to a house versus what you'd self-publish.
Yeah.
And I like having my foot in both camps, because you just don't know what's going to happen in this publishing world.
That's very true. And do you think, having been traditionally published, you've got some experience and some knowledge that maybe those of us who only independently publish maybe don't have?
No, not at all. I've got friends who have never been traditionally published who have hit USA Today and are doing exceedingly well. Really? I think that it's about going to conferences, joining the right loops, so that you are hearing what's going on and what's working, reaching out to people. I've always, if I see an author who's done something and I'm wondering how that happened, I email them, and just, I don't know them from a bar of soap, but and sometimes they don't want to engage, and other times they're happy to share. So if you don't ask, you don't get, is the simple answer to that. And I think people have different reasons. Like, a couple of friends I know self-publish because they're very slow writers and don't feel like they want to be put under a deadline that a traditional house might put you under. So there's all sorts of reasons why someone would go self-pub versus traditional. I don't think either way is wrong. I think it's just what suits you as a person and an individual at the time.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So tell us about being a USA Today best-selling author, and how on earth do you get to do that?
That's interesting. Well, getting into BookBub, I think, is probably the quickest way to hit a list. Obviously, New York Times no longer doing ebooks and everything, so it's much more difficult. And print runs aren't very big anymore for most authors, so it's hard to get onto the New York Times with romance anymore. Mm-hmm. But USA Today is still just straight sales, and it's ebook and book sales, so it doesn't make any difference. I think if I used to say, oh, it has to be a good book, but some of my fellow authors says, no, it doesn't have to be a good book, it just has to hit a wave and, be again that luck element. My first book in my Disgraced Lord series, so my 7th book came out on the 29th of August, which was A Love to Remember, but the first book, A Kiss of Lies, is the one that hit USA Today, and it hit it with a BookBub special. Right. And then I've gone on and hit it twice more since then. So it's just, normally it's a special, but you can hit it just with a release week where everyone happens to be following your series and really wants that book. So putting your book up for pre-order and getting reviews is quite important as well, so that people start talking about your book, and then on release day you've already got some reviews sitting there. But again, it's BookBub is king, and unfortunately if you're self-pubbing and you're new to self-pubbing, it is extremely difficult to get a BookBub promotion slot. But I just say keep trying, just keep applying, and it might take you 12 months, it might take you 18 months, but eventually you might get one.
So on BookBub you've got to have
it's easier to get them with a publishing house. Yes,
and you've got to have so many reviews, don't you, before?
That's what they say, but if you're with a publishing house, maybe not. And I was just talking to some author friends about this yesterday. I got my BookBub email yesterday to say, here are the specials, and there was a historical on there with only 6 reviews and a 3.1 star rating, so not even a very good rating, and only 6 reviews, and it's still got a BookBub because it's a traditionally published book, and I'm assuming the publishing house got her in there. So I don't know how they make these decisions. She is also a well-known author, but obviously that book's just not been that well received. But who knows how BookBub makes the decision, and I think you've just got to keep trying. But you've got to remember BookBub has investors. They raised about 40 million a couple of years ago to expand, so I'm assuming those investors are wanting a return, so they're going to take those people that have got a sales history behind them, just as everything else is in this book world. So it's very tough for new authors.
That is. And I'm presuming you'd have a mailing list and a fairly good wrangle on marketing.
Because I'm a marketer, I think that really helps if you're self-pubbing. You've got to, build your brand or your presence. And a lot of people go, oh, you don't sell off Facebook and you don't sell off Twitter. You may not necessarily sell, but you build your brand with those social media platforms, and that's quite important, so that you're top of mind if someone does see something like BookBub and goes, oh, I know that author. You're more likely to buy a book from someone that you know or and interact with. So I think building your own newsletter list is important. I'm not sure sending out big newsletters is any good anymore, because people are busy. But I think letting people know when you have a new book and when you've got a special on, or promoting your friends' specials and cross-promoting, so that there's always something of interest to your readers. It may not be your book, but it may be someone else's book. And just slowly build your newsletter list. So I've got about 10,000 on mine, so you can know when you've got a new release, that's 10,000 people that you can go to immediately and say, well, here's the new release, here's the reviews, here's a snippet of the book, and they might be interested in buying it.
Wow, and obviously you don't get 10,000 people on your mailing list overnight, so how long has it taken you to get those sorts of people?
Quite a long time.
Yeah.
I've had my mailing list since about 2011, and I think you really start to get momentum after you've got 4 or 5 or 6 books out there.
Yeah.
So the more books you have published, the more readers have a chance of finding you. And then, of course, hitting USA Today with that book, and obviously that series is gelled with readers. And that's the other thing. There's no point flogging a series that doesn't work. So if a series, you're up to book 5 or 6 and the series isn't really selling, maybe you've got to look at, well, is that a series that readers want, and maybe look at starting something else and writing something else. So I'd probably give it to 4 or 5 books. I know another friend of mine's, one of her series wasn't selling very well until she put book 4 out, and then it took off. So you've got to give it a bit of time, but I think it's important not to flog a dead horse.
Yeah, absolutely. So how many books do you put out a year, roughly, and what's your word count?
My last 2 years haven't been very good. I wasn't very well, and I also had my auntie was dying of cancer for 1 year, and then I wasn't very well the next. So I have had a bad couple of years, but this year I'll probably have 4 books out, and they're all different lengths. So 2 85,000 word books, 1 60,000, and then 1 novella. So you can do different lengths and get, they say you need a book out a quarter, and I think it is important for the Amazon algorithms to have regular books out, because that's all part of, being given a ranking and being put in front of the also boards and all of those sorts of things. So if you've only got 1 book out a year, it is really difficult, and because Amazon is king, the biggest bookseller. So you really do need to put at least 3 out a year, I would say, and that's hard. That's hard work, especially if you're working, somewhere else, other than writing. And I think that's a big thing, is don't be too hard on yourself. Just do what you can do and just keep writing the best books you can, and eventually people will find you. It may not happen quickly and it may not happen overnight, but if you're in this for a career, then it doesn't matter if it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. So one of the other things you do is you're the president of Romance Writers of New Zealand. So how long have you been associated with them?
Since 2006, when I first started writing. I think one thing for me is, if you're going to bother to do something, then you do it properly. So I joined Romance Writers in 2006, and not only that, I really learnt my craft. I did lots and lots of online courses. Patricia Kay, who's still doing courses, I believe, in the States, does fantastic courses on character development and plot and all those sorts of things. And so I just think if you belong to any organisation, then at some point you've got to give back. So I ran for president last year, and I'm president again this year, and we're just trying to do things that help other authors.
Excellent. And you've actually got quite a lot of membership in New Zealand. Do you know roughly how many you've got at the moment?
We've got about 326 or something like that, which is a good size for us. But it fluctuates all the time, because I think people start and then life gets in the way, and it does get in the way. So, they stop for a few years, then they might rejoin. It always fluctuates somewhere around between 250 and 350. Normally.
Which is great for a country that, is what, 4 million people these days?
Yeah, about 4.6 million people. Yeah, we're quite proud of the New Zealand achievements. You'll normally find at least one New Zealand writer in the top 100 of any category on Amazon. We sell particularly well. We usually have no trouble getting editors and agents to come down to New Zealand. They're always happy to sign us. So
yeah, and why wouldn't they want to come? It's such a beautiful country to come and visit.
I think the difference for us is RWNZ is very focused on the American market because we don't have a publishing market in New Zealand, whereas Australia is completely different. They do have a romance publishing industry. So we always set our sights on America, whereas I think Australians tend to and can make a living, I believe, from publishing just in Australia. So maybe it's a market that some of our New Zealand guys should be focusing more on, but we tend to go more to the USA.
Yeah, no, and that's, I know, I'm independently or published, and I do fairly well in, Amazon.com.au, but when you think, big picture, America is a gigantic market, so why not try and go after it? I did join the RWNZ just after your last conference because I heard how brilliant it was. And I'm like, I need to go to that. So tell us.
We've got a really exciting one coming up in 2018. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us some of your big names.
We've got Damon Swade, who is on the board of RWA, and he is a fantastic craft speaker. I don't know if you've seen any of his YouTube clips with Christian Higgins or anything like that, but he's very, very good. And then we've got Bella Andre, who is probably one of the most successful self-publishing authors. So she's coming down to help us with our marketing and self-publishing strategies. Then we've got Grace Burrows, who is one of the biggest historical authors at the moment, and she's coming down to do some fantastic craft things that I have never seen done here in New Zealand. And of course we've got Nalini Singh as well, who'll be doing some workshops as well. Fantastic.
And Nalini, who's in Brisbane this weekend, I think it is, for Comic-Con, so I can't make that one, but
amazing.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely coming over. So it's next year. It's August 10th and 11th. Have I got those dates right?
Yes, that's right. Yes, it is. We've got one agent coming down who is Liz Patoot, who was an editor at St Martin's Press until July, and she is hungry, and she's become an agent now, and she's really hungry and searching for people, so she's a great agent to bring down for next year.
Fantastic. Is she only in one particular genre, or is she looking...
No, she's across genres, and she's with the Seymour Agency.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, well, that's excellent. So we can all start saving up and getting ready for that now, a few months away.
It's really worth doing. If you are interested in romance writing, then I really recommend going to the romance writing conferences, because you just learn so much. Even just the networking with other authors is tremendous. Yeah,
that's excellent. I am really looking forward to that, and thank you so much for talking to me today, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person next year at conference.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.